Coogs House. I know there's been a lot of turnover in the Houston Cougar football program, but listen, Houston's gonna be okay. And it's not just me saying it this time.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you want to join in the conversation but just don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you enjoy pineapple on your pizza, don't get too feisty in there talking about it. Some people get really heated up about that one, but tell us. Now, today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll have more on that in a second, but I got a new friend here to introduce you guys to, Max Chadwick from PFF. You guys have heard me use PFF and their statistics a lot before, but Max comes on to talk about things Houston, Big 12, getting ready for things like that, and he wanted to come on and talk about it. I want to have him on and talk about it. So without further ado, let's bring on Max. And we are joined by Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus. Now, Max, I got to ask a question today to start off with. Do you think pineapple goes on pizza?
Good question. No, I have never put pineapple on pizza. I'm not going to discriminate against people who do. I mean, if that's what you like, that's what you like. I'm not one of those people that thinks it's like a sin against humanity, to do that. But I personally, as a personal preference, I've never tried it before. So maybe I don't know if I like it or not, but it always just seemed a little odd to me. So I never actually tried it before. Maybe I would like it, but I don't. Again, I don't do it, but I don't hate people who do that. I think it's a little crazy for people to be like that.
Well, and I appreciate you not being super discriminatory. Some people get really fired up with those kinds of things.
I do.
Max, you come from Pro Football Focus, college football analyst. You host their college football show, do a lot of work with the company. And before we get into the nitty-gritty on Houston, I cite Pro Football Focus grades and analytics a lot on the show, right? I use the grades to try and describe how, the Houston offensive line as a whole maybe didn't hold up great, but Patrick Paul is having a great season or whatever, right? So in your words, not just to sell the service, it is a subscription-based thing, right? It's premium stats or whatever. But what is the advantage to what Pro Football Focus does for the college football game as opposed to the pro game?
Well, from the college football perspective, we still grade every single player on every single play in every single game. And we're talking every single game. We're talking FBS, FCS, some D2, some D3. If you want to know who the best right guard in the Sun Belt Conference is, I can tell you that in pretty much 20 seconds, basically. That's how advanced some of our stuff is. And that's why I think we have numbers and data that just simply nobody else has, and we can provide more context for every single player in college football more than anyone else. So that's why I think we're in a unique advantage that, we could tell you, hey, this guy is really going to be good. And then, other people start hearing about him because of the data that we have. So it's an unbelievable database that we have. It's an unbelievable tool that we have, and I'll never take it for granted. That's why I think that PFF is able to cover college football in the NFL better than almost anyone because of how much data we have on literally any player you could think of. We have a whole world of data on that player from the very first snap they've ever taken in college to their last snap in the NFL too. So it's pretty unbelievable the advantage that we have, and hopefully we get to use even more.
Well, and honestly, there were days in Houston's past where, like in Conference USA, diving into deep stats would have taken a lot. As Houston's moved up to bigger and bigger stages in the Big 12 now, I think the thing that's interesting using PFF is they look at all of these different, it's every single play, right? And so it really is very comprehensive. It's not just they actually talk about Houston. It's it's actually very, very focused. Mm-hmm. Houston moves up big time and has made this big coaching change at the turn of the year for next season. And everyone in Houston is really excited about Willie Fritz. It's hard to say 10 times fast. I have to say, as a guy that, you watch a lot of national college football, you're involved in all the processes there at Pro Football Focus. His work at Tulane as of late is what's, really gained him some notoriety, knocking off USC in the Cotton Bowl and so on. What would you, as someone who watched it from a very particular lens, think is an exciting thing for Houston folks as Willie Fritz is bringing on this new era of football here?
I'd be over the moon. I thought it was one of the best hires of the offseason, honestly, when Houston hired Willie Fritz as their new head coach. And what he's done at Tulane has been unbelievable. I mean, he was hired at Tulane back in 2016 after a pretty good couple years at Georgia Southern. It took him some time, obviously, at Tulane to really get it going. They had an awful 2021 season. They went 2-10 that year, and then they went 12-2 the very next year and winning the Cotton Bowl as well and finishing as a top 10 team in the country. Actually, just by wins and losses, it's the biggest turnaround in college football history from going from 2-10 to 12-2. So it's amazing what he did at Tulane. Went 11-2 or 11-2. Yeah, excuse me. This past season, it's amazing the turnaround he's done, and that's going to be needed at Houston this upcoming year. With obviously they're trying to bounce back from a little bit of a disappointing first year in the Big 12 conference, going 4-8, obviously. So hopefully Willie Fritz can use some of his magic in turning around Tulane that he did for the same thing at Houston. So I love the hire. I thought it was as good as Houston could have possibly hoped for, honestly. So I think that was one of my favorite hires of the offseason, I will say.
Right. I mean, the money for a guy like Nick Saban was not really in the cards when you said,
No.
I think that this is, again, like it was his chance to move into the Power Four. It's Houston's chance to get a great winning coach. Lots of big factors here. I would point out if Houston added 10 wins from 4-8 last year, they'd be winning 14 games. We're playing in January. It's a whole different ball game, right?
Yep.
I don't know if we can quite get to that excited point yet. In the future, maybe, but not quite yet. But Willie Fritz is coming into Houston, and just like any coach transition, a lot of players left, honestly. I think that that's the nature of college football. And I'd appreciate, as someone who watches every single player, every single play, what is that like for you when you're trying to track all these guys and the movement and the differences? Before we get into Houston specifically, this is a national phenomenon.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, man. It's a nightmare keeping up with the transfer portal nowadays, how many players are entering it and transferring and transferring again, and then maybe even a third time. I mean, there was one guy at Tennessee this past year who transferred from Tennessee to Ole Miss, Tyler Barron, the edge defender. Transferred from Tennessee to Ole Miss, then Ole Miss to Louisville, and now he's in the transfer portal again. And he has not played a snap for Ole Miss. He didn't play a snap for Louisville either. So in a span of, say, 5 months, he's going to be at his fourth school, basically. So it is a nightmare to keep up with for this transfer portal right now. And Houston's no stranger to it. Obviously, they have a lot of new faces in that program right now, a lot of brand new starters, most of them transfers. And obviously some guys left as well. So that's going to happen whenever you have a head coaching change. So yeah, it's a new era of college football right now. It's kind of a wild, wild west era of college football, I will say.
Well, and I hope that calms people that, like, yes, a lot of good players left Houston, a lot of new faces coming in, but that is to be expected. And it's not this, it's not necessarily an indictment on the staff. It's just things change, right? Yeah. When you look at guys coming in, again, with all the grades and the analytics that Pro Football Focus offers, was there anyone that stuck out? Anybody that was like, oh, Houston got a guy there? Anything that Houston fans need to get excited about with a new face that they may not have as good an understanding of yet?
Yeah, I think one guy that stood out is Malik Carr coming in from Michigan State, the tight end. He has been a really productive player at Michigan State. Had an 81.9 grade this past season, had 352 receiving yards as well. I really like him. I think he's probably a top 20 to 25 tight end in college football right now. And that's obviously a big get for them and should be one of Donovan Smith's, favorite targets next year in Malik Carr. So I'm a big fan of his game. And I thought that was probably my favorite get, I think, for Houston in the portal.
Well, and you mentioned every quarterback's best friend can be their tight end very easily, right? Malik Carr's a giant target. He's like 6'6", 6'7", and a very big target at that. And I feel like Houston's getting ready for a more tight end centric offense with the changing coaching staff here as well. All right, now quick pause in the action. We're talking about the future of the football program, but unfortunately, there aren't any football games happening right now. But whatever you're doing in and around Houston or wherever you're at, you to make sure you're going to GameTime using the GameTime app to get tickets, because I'm telling you, it's got the best deals on tickets to anything you're trying to do. I'm talking comedy shows, the theater, music, the Stros, whomever you're trying to watch in person, whatever type of entertainment it is, Game Time's got the best deals on tickets. They got actually better deals the closer you get to the event, right? So if you're waiting for the first pitch, saying, should I go or should I not go? You check out Game Time. They got a last minute deal for you. They got flash deals, zone deals, all kinds of different things that pop up all the time to make sure you have the app open at all times. They got all in pricing, so there's no tricks, nothing hidden. One of my favorite things they offer, though, is that when you pick seats, they show you in that venue for that type of event what the view looks like from that seat. It's a great tool to make sure you're getting the best deal. You know exactly what to expect when you get there. Game Time ticket coverage means your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, the low price guarantee. It means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for the event for less. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Obviously, a number of different talents left Houston, some prolific pass catchers along that. Is there anyone as far as exits that you're like, oh man, you're better off without that? Anyone that you're like, oh, like that actually played? Obviously, guys that never played a snap. It's like, okay, well, yeah, whatever. But like anyone you're like, oh, they'll be fine. Don't worry about so and so.
Oh, Matthew Golden, I think, is probably the number one guy I would say. I think he's a guy that is going to be a starting receiver at Texas this upcoming year, which is going to be a top 5 team in college football probably. So Matthew Golden's probably the number one guy. It's kind of a brutal loss, and obviously the addition of Malik Carr helps out a little bit with Donovan Smith. You know, losing Matthew Golden is pretty tough, but at least you got a guy like Malik Carr to throw to. So yeah, I'd probably say Matthew Golden's probably the one guy they lost in the portal that I was like, oh, that stings, definitely. You know, other guys like Patrick Paul who entered the draft is another huge loss. But in terms of guys who actually entered the portal, I think Matthew Golden is definitely going to be one that definitely hurts Houston a lot.
Talk to me, because I tried to contextualize, and honestly, I used some Pro Football Focus data, how strong of a 2 seasons really Patrick Paul had. You mentioned his name, and I just wanted to pause on his name for a second. I'm throwing you off. This isn't quite what we talked about going through, but Patrick Paul, I'm a guy that likes the trenches. I like watching football happen between the hash marks there, and I try to put together for folks like, yes, there was a lot of pressure on Donovan Smith, and yes, they didn't run the ball quite like you'd have hoped for in a successful season. Yes, they only won 4 games, but Patrick Paul had a tremendous couple of seasons, and there's a reason he was a second-round pick that thought in his own mind he should be a first-round pick, right? Like, he's not a crazy person. Help me explain this. He was really good the last 2 years.
Oh, he was unbelievable, man. He actually, this past year, had a 91.5 pass blocking grade, which led all tackles in college football. And the guys right behind him, Joe Alt, who obviously was a top 5 pick in the draft. Dominic Puni is a really good tackle at Kansas. Olu Fashanu, again, top 10 pick in the draft. Troy Fautanu, first-round pick. Jordan Morgan was number 7, first-round pick. Kingsley Suamataia, second-round pick at number 9. Kelvin Banks Jr., number 8, is going to be a top 5 pick probably next year, or top 10 pick at least. So yeah, he's an elite pass blocker, and obviously that's the most important trait for any offensive tackle or any offensive lineman is their pass blocking, because of how pass happy today's day and age of NFL is. So run blocking is still a work in progress, I think, but as a pass blocker, I mean, he was the best tackle in college football this past year. So yeah, I think he's a really, really good player. I'm excited to see him in the NFL.
Yeah, and so he's in Miami, and while Jalen Waddle didn't go to the University of Houston, he's a Houston local kid, and so it adds a couple of fun guys to keep eyes on there as Houstonians. I want to ask, not that anyone is going to be as good as Patrick. It's hard to replace a guy like that. Are there any Cougs, though, on the radar for guys like, okay, this guy could Houston's had a guy drafted several years in a row now, which is a good deal for the program, moving in the right direction. Anyone on the radar that you're looking at like, okay, that guy could project to being a pro? I mean, some writers have kind of gone off and projected Donovan Smith even as being a fairly high draft pick, actually.
Yeah, I'm a little weary of that. I think he's obviously a freak athlete. I think he's a really boomer bust right now, and another quarterback who's like that is Cam Ward, who's now at Miami. Who's a very boomer bust quarterback who's got unbelievable athletic tools. I think Donovan Smith is a lot like that too. Don't get me wrong, he had a good year last year. He had a 7.7 grade, but That's one guy that I'm a little okay. Like I want to see more first before I start projecting him that high. I do know a lot of my friends who are in the draft game, they do like him a lot. So I do like Donovan Smith. Another guy I want to shout out who made the move to Houston last year from New Mexico, I believe, AJ Halsey, the safety, who had an unbelievable freshman year while at New Mexico, and then went to Houston this past year. Still was a really good player. He'd probably be the next guy I say keep an eye on for the NFL draft in 2025. I think he's probably the next best prospect after Donovan Smith right now.
And looking at, I mean, I don't mean to be quantitative all the time, but that is kind of the gig, right? At Pro Football Focus, what number jumps off the page for him? What is the thing that's okay? He is elite. He is high level. He is top XYZ percentile at this.
Yeah, he had an 85.6 run defense grade this past year, which was obviously incredibly good. I mean, anytime you're in the 80s for any grade, that's very, very good. So I'm a huge fan of AJ Halsey, dude. I really am. I think he's a really underrated college football player. 90. So we actually have this metric too, where we can track how athletic a player is in game, like how fast they're running, how to change direction, all that. He scored in the 98th percentile for safeties in that game athleticism score metrics. He runs over 21 miles per hour is his top speed this past season. So really athletic safety, which I think will be a really good thing for him in the NFL draft, NFL combine when he finally gets there. Good size as well, 6 feet tall, 215 pounds. Like I say, he's a great run defender. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like about AJ Halsey. I think obviously he's a lot worse at the Power 5 level than he was at New Mexico, which should be expected, honestly. So hopefully he can kind of get more acclimated in his junior year and become even better. But I'm a huge fan of him, man. I think he's got sky high potential because of how athletic he is. And he's shown some really high level play already in his first 2 years of college football too. So yeah, AJ Halsey is definitely a guy to watch out for next year.
Well, and another kid that went to a smaller school and then came back home after showing out at New Mexico. So Houston fans are like that because it's always good to cheer for, or always fun to cheer for local kids. This is maybe more big picture college football, but you mentioned AJ Halsey came to Houston as they joined the Big 12, and there was a big jump for them. Houston was one of the handful of Group of 5 schools that got to move into the Power 5 last season, and now the Power 4 as the Big 12 expanded. And looking at numbers, again, quantitative data by and large, what stuck out to you as far, I mean, obviously there's going to be some sliding in the stats, right? But what stuck out to you as far as their jump from Group of 5 to Power 5?
Yeah, obviously it was a rough year. I think it was a rough year for every new Big 12 school last year, whether you look at UCF, BYU, Houston, or Cincinnati. I mean, none of them made a bowl game last year. So, I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on, where it's just, I think that there's something that you can take away from them. Now they have NFL players, and which is why, UCF actually did make a bowl game last year, but other three did not. Houston, I thought in terms of pass blocking, obviously, namely Patrick Paul, they were really good at that. Donovan Smith is still an electric playmaker, even going up to the Power 5 level. They still, like I said, they still have some really other Nelson Caesar at edge defender is another really, really good player. Some guys do translate to that level, but other guys take longer to get acclimated. Other guys just simply aren't good enough to be playing at the Power 5 level. So I think Houston's in that transition period right now where they're kind of figuring out, okay, who can actually do this and who can't. So yeah, I think they did an okay job last year. I think 4-8 was not obviously what Houston fans were hoping for, not what they're used to in the American Athletic Conference. But I think that this, in time, with Willie Fritz especially, this could be another really good program in the Big 12.
And Houston moved into the Big 12 with the handful of smaller schools last year. Next year in the Power 4, there is going to be an even bigger Big 12. With quantitative data in front of you and with how much you're watching the national picture of college football, what's the end game with this gigantic constant realignment shuffling? Like, what are you seeing? And then I want to dial it back after that to how it impacts Houston. But at a national level, like, is this ever going to stop? Are we just going to keep shifting gears here? All right, now I want to pause the action with Max and I talking about building a competitive football program in Houston because I like competing, you like competing. We want to see competitive football. And in the meantime, while it's not football season yet, we can compete on things like Monopoly Go. Now, I know you've heard me talk about this before. I want to throw a flag on me or whatever. But with Monopoly Go, I got to stress that you can both team up and play against your friends in all kinds of different tournaments. You can work together and build up each other's boards. more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, like stickers and cool playing pieces, fun emojis to talk trash to back and forth. The biggest thing, though, is that Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure, robot pachinko, etc. There's all kinds of new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or rent frenzies, or other stuff. I'm not going to give it away. Other stuff too. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Is this ever gonna stop? Are we just gonna keep shifting gears here?
I think we're gonna slow down for a little bit. It does feel like we're gonna get to a Super League pretty soon, which might be just two power conferences in the Big Ten and SEC, and we'll see where Houston falls into that. I think they're good enough at basketball that they would get an invite to one of those two, but we'll see. Yeah, it feels like for now we're okay, but I think with the Pac-12, dying, it really shifted everything. And obviously Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 and other big moves too. But I think down the line we're still gonna have more. I don't think this is it for realignment in college football, and there could be some more seismic changes in college football pretty soon.
Well, and aside from like schools like Houston moving up a division, it felt like, right? I guess technically they're both Division One, the AAC and the Big 12. But how does that impact the kind of stuff y'all do at PFF to see all this movement? I mean, is it just as simple as realigning Excel sheets, or what's going on there?
Yeah, it basically is. I mean, we're still grading. I mean, we don't adjust for competition level. So the grades, a guy who grades out at a 90 in a group of 5 school, and a guy who grades out an 85 at a Power 5 school, the guy who grades out an 85 at a Power 5 school is probably better than the guy who grades out a 90 at a group of 5 school. So we don't really adjust for that. So it doesn't really affect our lives too much, fortunately. But it is definitely something to keep an eye on. Something that, my job as a college football analyst is to keep track of everything and what's going on and everything that's going to happen at those levels. So it doesn't really affect PFF too much as a whole. But it is obviously affecting the world of college football a lot.
Well, and so that's what comes in. I mean, you don't just work with PFF; you also host a show, right? That's where I'm
Right.
assuming that's where all this context building you're constantly doing is most focused. And so talk us a little bit about what is the PFF show is not just reading off data, right? Like you're contextualizing it, you're going through it. So when people click off of this, go to their next show, and they're looking for that listen, what are they listening to? What can they expect?
Yeah, you can find the PFF College Football Show wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube is me and my co-host Dalton Wassman, who's a data collector, at PFF. He's brilliant. We're contextualizing it, right? Because the PFF database we have is just a lot of numbers and not much context behind those numbers, and we're contextualizing it and saying what we see. Because obviously we watch the tape too. It's not like we're just looking at the numbers and saying, okay, football's not just played in a spreadsheet. Anti-analytics guys love saying that. It is true to an extent. Obviously, the PFF numbers are based off the games on the field. It's not like they're being played literally on a spreadsheet. But yeah, we are contextualizing a lot, and I think that's why hopefully down the line we can become a really, really good show. Is that because right now we have all these numbers and all that we could tell you stuff about players that literally nobody else in college football can tell you about. So I think that's a really valuable tool that we have, and hopefully we take advantage of it and down the line and hopefully hopefully be a huge show hopefully pretty soon, but we'll see.
All right, so I actually kind of hope the answer to this is not a Houston guy, but we'll see. You do this show where you contextualize numbers, you work with numbers and are analyzing data, quantitative by and large, all day long, but you also watch the games. You get into this business because you like it, right? Like at some level, like we're all fans, right? Off top of your head, the guy that stuck out the most is like, I can't believe that guy scores that well in what we do. Is there anybody that just the numbers in play, just line up and you're like, what is going on here?
Not really, because most of the time, the numbers are just the grades and the numbers are based off the tape. Now, of course, there's some plays where I disagree with the grade that a guy got, but those are so few and far between. It doesn't really affect the grades that much. I definitely think there were guys that we are higher on and lower on than the national media and national just fans are maybe disagree with us on. But that's what I think makes us unique. And that is that, we could tell you that, hey, this is a secret superstar that nobody's talking about right now. Or, hey, this guy is not as good as the hype he's getting right now. I think Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a guy. I don't disagree with our data at all like that, but yeah, there's sometimes there are guys though that we definitely disagree with the national consensus on for sure.
Okay, so I like the political answer. You're saying it is unique.
I'm trying to think. I am trying to think of a guy for you. I really am, because that's a really good question. I'm trying to think of like who was like a. I think one guy that I interviewed him too, so I love the kid. But Cam Ward from Miami, I think, is being a little overblown right now. I think he's still too much of a roller coaster for me to put him in the top 5 of QBs in the country right now. I didn't even have him in my top 10. So that's one guy that I'm like, I pump the brakes a little bit. You know, he's a little bit of a roller coaster. I love the kid again, but I'm not ready to call him a top 5 or even top 10 quarterback in the country yet.
Well, there was a brief moment in the sun where it looked like Cam Ward might have ended up at Houston. I think he and Sam Brown now being at Miami, I think they've got some sort of relationship, right?
He told me he wanted to go to Houston. They never offered him. So you guys, maybe I don't know if you regret that now because he got Donovan Smith, but he told me that he wanted to go there and they never offered him. So
well, because I think he's got connections to some of the guys, and then I think that the new staff really likes Donovan. I think Donovan's a very likable person. First of all, I should point that out. That's probably a big piece of it too. But anyway, I appreciate the indulging in my thought experiment here. Max, you mentioned the Pro Football Focus show. What other kinds of things are you working on before we get out of here, so I know where to send people?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that. You can find it at the PFF College Football Show on YouTube, anywhere you can podcast. You could find all my articles at pff.com. We're putting out right now kind of a watch list for the 2025 NFL draft, the 10 players to know at every single position. It's never too early to look at the next draft. And then also you can find me on Twitter at Max Chadwick CFB as well.
Thanks again for coming on, Max. It's great to talk to you and great to hear some national perspective on what's going on at Houston. Go Cougs, bud.
Of course. Thank you, man.
All right, now go make sure you follow Max and all the stuff he's doing over at PFF. I use that service a lot. I cannot recommend it more to folks that like to get into that next level of college football data, detail, etc. Max is doing a great job breaking it down, writing stories about it every day, talking about it on the podcast. And I'm excited to hopefully build a Locked On Coogs and Max Chadwick relationship. So keep that going. Go see what they're doing as well. Thank you all for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Obviously, I don't think any big crazy news is breaking out over the weekend, but if something does, we'll be sure to break it down. If not, we'll be back to talk to you on Monday morning about all things Houston Cougars. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Houston Cougars, every day. Go Cougs.